when it comes to ABM, the kind of time it will take you to get your first customer will probably disappoint you, especially a founder which has worked in inbound. I still remember when we got our first ABM conversion, by that time we had given up. I was actually sure that, we can't do this. They're just wasting our time. They're probably these people, or if I can say Babu, sitting on their seat and they're just, like having fun, talking to me, and then after the call, they make fun of me and, things like that. That's what I had in my mind. That's all I could think of. We had given up. And when they finally came up with the purchase order, I was like, is this for real? I was shocked. I was surprised.
Hi everyone, welcome to SaasBoomi's Marketing Nation podcast season 2. Today I have a very special guest, and more than a guest, he's a very good friend for both me and Varun. We are part of this wonderful Dalhousie gang, and we are really looking forward for this conversation with Mr. Ankit Oberoi, who is the CEO of Zelto, previously at AdPushup. Now he's chilling in Dubai, so we had to pull him in to talk about marketing and everything under that. So welcome, Ankit, and hi, Varun. How are you?
Yeah, good to be back. Good to have you on the podcast finally, Ankit. There are a lot of stories to share, huh? Can't wait.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good to be talking to, two great friends. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Not all stories would be told today. I think some are for in-person conversations, which we will have.
Ankit is one of probably the most methodical persons that I've come across. He's one of those people where I personally want to be a fly on the wall and see how he works, because he's just so clinical about everything he does. And for AdPushup, it's probably one of the few companies, Arvind, which have really cracked the ABM playbook from India.
Proper ABM playbook and like the methodical things which you said, right? Like, right, getting the ICPs and like documenting everything. And I really want to just see the documentations he has done. I think he would trust me if I'm wrong. Ankit, do you have notes of everything you've done in AdPushup till date?
I mean, not everything. I mean, what you guys call methodological, I call OCD. But we like to make processes. Anything which can be made repeatable, we like to document it and make sure we're making the most out of the learning that we have in the moment. So yeah, taking notes, building processes, using a hell lot of Notion and stuff like that.
So the funny thing, Varun, the yin and yang, you need the complementary thing with everything, right? Like, so I was actually looking for a chief of staff, and somebody came and asked me, like, what are you looking for? Like, I said, see, if my personality is this, I need someone probably half of what Ankit is. That would be a better combination, right? That's what my requirement was.
Give me a year or two, Arvind. I will apply for your chief of staff, man.
Dude, I can't afford you. Seriously, I can't afford you.
No.
In this podcast, I personally can't wait for Ankit to share his entire ABM playbook, hopefully. We're short on time, but there's so much to learn. I know I was part of SGX and I was blown away by the depth of the execution on ABM by AdPushup. And there was just every weekend we would look forward to learning and seeing what Ankit was going to share. So Ankit, where would you start really? I'm just curious, like, why ABM? Everyone just does PPC or SEO. SEO is the forte for Indian SaaS startups. How did you settle on ABM?
So I think the reason why this happened, right, where there's been a lot of businesses built around inbound. And we saw this also recently, in the caravan, SaasBoomi caravan, where, SEO related topics, inbound related topics still have a lot more meaning to young founders. And because I think it just sounds so interesting, where think about it, like, one classic, you can say fallacy or something which always, people fall for is like, you build and they will come, right? Whether that is product, whether that is marketing. And inbound just resonates so much with that, right? Okay, I'll do my inbound marketing, and then automatically it creates a flywheel or, an automatic system where people will come, which can also be done with ABM. But the problem is, in the last decade or so, a lot of successful case studies that we've seen coming out of India have been largely inbound dependent, right? And I would somewhere club PPC also in inbound, although it's paid, but the process of the buyer's journey is so much similar to an inbound process where somebody's initiating a search. Whereas the whole ABM, account-based marketing model, is itself very, very, I mean, the whole funnel is flipped, The way I look at it is that inbound, when you compare it, it is like, fishing with nets. But ABM is like fishing with spears, right? Where you're pinpointing and targeting, going after accounts, right? So the whole process, your funnel is so inverted when it comes to ABM, because you start off, as the funnel shrinks down in inbound, in ABM, you start with a list of companies and then you add contacts and it keeps growing and the activities, etc. So it's somewhat, in some sense, at the top, an inverted funnel instead of when you compare it with inbound. But just like, most startups which originated in India, we were no different. We saw a lot of these successful case studies. We had angel investors. We were so active in SaaSX days, previously. And then we saw, case studies of across different startups, all making, minting a lot of leads and, doing a lot of business through inbound. So naturally, that is where we went as well. But somewhere around 2018, we really started investing in understanding what our market is. We had sizable revenue. We were quite comfortably over, let's say, I think $1 million in ARR somewhere around 2018, 2019. And that is the point where, a founder typically feels that, especially, within your peer set and the community, feel like, okay, well, we've achieved something from, we're not going to die, right? We've made it so far that we have enough revenue that, okay, since we were not massively funded, we didn't have like venture capitalist investors, it was a point where you start thinking like, okay, well, I'm doing okay, but what's next, right? The startup will survive. We've made it work. And when we would look at our customers, we would really find it hard to see where more can we get such customers, or how do we scale this business faster. So I think the thought about ABM was a byproduct. The problem was, how do we find more of our ICP, rather to rediscover who our ICP was. And during that process, when we really went about understanding a market, segmenting it, finding out where the, business is, who has the challenges that we're trying to solve, our product solves, we stumbled and realized that classic Pareto rule, where we realized that 80% of the business is with the top 20% of the companies, right? And that's, when you can call it a eureka moment. In hindsight, it seems like so obvious, but then you suddenly realize, well, why was I not doing this from day one? Why was I even going for these SMB companies, or if I can say in Hindi, garib logo ke liye software nahi banana chahiye, right? Which is a learning that we just realized after spending about 4 or 5 years, that we were making software for the wrong audience. Or wrong segment, not the wrong audience, but the wrong segment of this ICP. That's, when we started studying more about the large customers. Now the decision-making process for a large buyer is very different from a 50 people company, or, founder-led decision-making, or 100 people company. So that's basically which opened the door, or I can say, pointed us to the door about, we need something called ABM.
When I was running Kayako, I also knew that there were these bigger fishes out there, but I just didn't feel worthy enough to go after them. When did you, feel, and this then follows back to you, Ankit, why did you feel that you were worthy enough? Like, is it just a figment of our imagination that we can't go after these big enterprises? Because I knew the Pareto principle. I knew there were these bigger customers out there, but I just felt like, oh, this is just such a monumental task to go after them. And I just didn't pursue them.
So I'll tell you what we did. We were very clear in being the Walmart of software back in my previous startup companies where we used to work. And the positioning was very clear. We don't build for the Fortune 500. We build for the unfortunate 5 million businesses. This is what we very proudly we used to say that. And
so you were also like similar to me, right? In that,
correct. Like the segment is like still to this SMBs, less than 250 employees or 500 employees, like 5 tech, 10 tech. But the tricky part, what we learned over a period of time is 80% of your business logos come from small businesses. 20% of your logos were mid-market and above, mid-market and enterprise. But the revenue contribution was 50-50. So we didn't change the engine. We basically started to survive with both the engines. So we will position ourselves as the software for SMBs because again, the market TAM is bigger. I think maybe that would be we can sell to anybody. TAM was bigger. We didn't want to leave that much money and walk away from it.
That feels easy as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Ankit.
No, to your point, it feels easy. And I think it's also about the founder's mindset, right? I never worked in a large company, right? All my learning was online, right? So my whole business experience came by interacting with people online, right? Sitting out of India, I did not have that experience interacting with decision maker like this ever, right? So for me, it felt like it's impossible. Like, how can I even dare to build something for large companies? They probably need something which is, 1000x better than what I can provide them, right? And they're probably buying from companies which are doing 100x better than, what we are even capable of, right? But when you actually went out into the market and started speaking to some of these companies which were building software for these larger organizations or these large customers, it helps in doing that benchmarking where you realize they're probably as mediocre as those large enterprises themselves. So what is stopping us from disrupting it, right? Probably that was what happened for us around that time.
Interesting. So Ankit, my curious question next is so you also touched upon briefly about ICP, and personally, I've seen your ICP analysis and how you act when you shared the document in our SGX. We were really, really amazed by the detailed analysis you have done of how you did the ICP, how you did target and figure out which audience you want to sell to. How did you go through about this ICP process overall?
See, the process started like how a lot of startups think about culture, Everybody in the company has some sense of your culture, right? And if something happens in the company, they'll say, oh, this is not our culture. This is our culture. But what happens is in most cases, people don't know exactly because nobody is written it down. I think same would hold true for our ICP, when we were, let's say 20 people, when we will say, oh, we need to sell to this customer, we sell to this customer. Somebody in sales team will say, oh, this is not our customer, we should disqualify them. But nobody had a clear idea about, because nobody had actually written it down even back in 2017-18 for us, right? Nobody had actually profiled it down. And I was probably, reading some content online and I found some templates about, what other companies were building as ICPs. And I think we had a little bit of a conflict in one of our cases where two sales reps or a sales rep and an SDR manager were basically arguing about, whether to continue working on a prospective lead or not. The turning point, we realized that while everybody says they know the ICP, I don't think it is 100% clear. So the first really initial thought was just to document and write it down. And boy, what an experience was it. When we actually asked the team to write down what the ICP was, 5-6 people came out with 5 or 6 different versions. There was some overlap, but there were so many differences. That was like a shock to me because I thought, most people knew what our ICP was. But during that process, that's how we got into the process and we realized it's not only those reps, but even myself, I don't know as much about our ICP. And when I started looking and reading more about, what kind of level or depth companies would go into, we would do customer interviews, but not to the depth where we would understand and ask, what forums they're visiting, what websites they're visiting, in their decision-making process, what all other consultants are they using or, what are the kind of touch points they're crossing through. And when we started making it, I just got so absorbed in the whole process and I got so intrigued by the whole process that I think at least 20-30% of my time was going in doing customer interviews, talking to people. I made great friends. I think just this last weekend, there was somebody visiting us from Turkey, and she is the CEO of a very popular website, a news website in Turkey based out of Istanbul. Our connect started over an ICP call, and now that I recall, I realize, we've met so many times. She's hosted me in Istanbul. I've hosted her in Dubai. And it all resulted because of so many, passionate, curious questions, which I asked her about who our ideal customers were supposed to be. And she was one of the person who patiently answered and was very curious to understand what other people were saying in the industry so she could learn as well.
Varun, I have a question for you. So when he said the salespeople said, this is not our ICP. I think in my case, it is kind of different. Salespeople wants to go and sell to every MSP out there. The product people are saying that don't sell to them. We need to only sell to these people because the roadmap kind of will be different. The ask will be different. Have you ever been, both of you, have you ever been in a situation where you need to pick an ICP so that your roadmap doesn't get derailed? And how do you actually handle this?
I feel the awareness of who your ICP, at least before the first $1 or $2 million, is usually very vague. And companies which try to box themselves in coming up with an ICP, which is usually led from the product team, or if the founder's product led from the founder, causes more harm than good. So for the first 1 or 2 million, you really want to spread yourself a bit too thin. That's where the serendipity and the awareness comes in. One very profound thing stood out from what Ankit was saying is we also had a very good documentation culture at Kayako, but it was very top-led. So, he said while he was explaining that I asked my salespeople, can you document the ICP? We also made the ICP document that was led by Jamie and me. And the adoption for that was a higher bar than what he would have experienced. I later learned, during the course of understanding the best practices of management, that in terms of your decision making, you need to involve especially the frontline folks. So I would give priority to the frontline employees in terms of discovery of ICP. So these are your support folks, customer success and sales, and less so on the product, because they are less aware. They're not hearing the signals from the market. Actually add a small story around this. So during the early days of Kayako, I felt I knew my customer, and I would build a feature and customers would just rave, oh, this is what exactly I wanted. And towards the later part, I started repositioning the company based on features, which was a very bad thing to do. And I would get an idea in my shower and I would feel like, if I do this, then suddenly the sales would increase. Very big mistake around this one. But the reason it didn't work is because during the early days, I had my ears closer to the ground. I was listening to those signals subconsciously from the support because I was involved in support, or sales because I was involved in sales. And the more distant I got from the front line, the more vague those signals became and more tainted my decision making became. So I think I would give complete priority actually to the frontline employees versus the product team. What's your experience on this one, Ankit?
Yeah, but I think Arvind does have a point where once you, let's say, once you've crossed that bar about that serendipity, figuring out, what the market leads you to, right? And you add a bit, or a, like dash of data analytics on market sizing, etc. Generally, what happens is, especially junior folks, they would try to internally upsell and, which properly known, more popularly known as the SaaS knife, right? Which they'll bring out and they'll say, oh, well, give me this and that and we'll get this revenue.
Recency effect.
Yes,
deals
exactly.
Which they lose on.
And inability to describe it as well, right? So because they're also not able to describe, so they come with solutions versus the problems because they haven't probed for the problems. Yeah.
In our industry, there were certain set of websites, right? For example, deeply political websites, which we wouldn't work with. Adult websites, waste websites, illegal websites, things like that. Or somebody who's doing which is probably gray, which is called arbitrage, where somebody is basically buying traffic. So it's not organic traffic coming onto your website, which you want to monetize through our platform. So in such cases, we had a bit of a gray line. So they would often go around and, get such customers and then negotiate with the product team and tell them, look, oh, this is what we need, which will change the roadmap a bit. So I think having a clarity and, of course, as you said, Varun, making sure that the decision making happens while bringing everybody together so that they are involved in the decision, but having a collective decision where you build an ICP or win is really helpful to define and tell everybody. And then the team can more or less hold it up because the rule remains true for everybody. So which is why involving them and having an ICP and a negative ICP, which is also part of the process, is very clear. So we know who we don't sell to.
How did you differentiate between outbound and ABM? Because the definitions are quite vague if you go and do a Google search.
Yeah, I think for our audience, we should probably little bit explain it explain the difference.
So you're right. And I think the way we looked at it, barring the definitions, we did have a process called outbound as well while we were running inbound. But outbound was more about, sending outbound emails, personalized emails. And internally for us, we had actually built a sort of like an assembly line for sending these outbound emails, where there were like a set of people who will mine the contacts, a set of people who will do research about them, add insights, and then there will be amazing copywriters which will write email copies, and then they will go to the salesperson, where with one click, all their emails will go out, making sure whatever spam filters are not hit, etc. So that's what we used to call outbound, right, for us, which was just typically, salespeople reaching out to prospects. But I think outbound, at least for us, was like a very basic version. ABM is just a next level, right? Where the kind of work that your marketing team is doing is not just air cover. A lot of times people think ABM and, when it comes to enterprises, marketing can only provide air cover while your sales troops are fighting on the ground. But I think marketing can go shoulder to shoulder with your troops. And I think that's how we differentiate what outbound becomes ABM.
How did you structure your organization? Because that's also something that I'm curious on when you became aware about pursuing ABM. So what was the role of marketing? What was the role of sales? Where did the handoff happen?
And that's the first question usually Varun asks. I was surprised I got.
I'm rusty.
So what is interesting here is there is no handoff. So we think of it as that the sales and marketing, both teams together own the funnel, which means that there is no single point where marketing will say, okay, after this point, it is your responsibility. The marketing team is working across the funnel. Even if it is bottom of the funnel, even if it is post-conversion with the account management team, the marketing team, a certain set of people in that team have a goal to convert your customers into influencers, get more referrals, introductions, get a larger contract. So I think marketing is something which is a river running in parallel with the funnel, while the work which they do changes. I would expect my marketing team in inbound to do macro work, which is at a group stage. In ABM, on each account, each contact super personalized. Whereas the sales team in both cases is working, of course, on each individual basis, how they're supposed to. So the only thing which is changing is the kind of work in the funnel which they're working on changing, but there is no handoff.
But how is the accountability pinned, or how are the incentives structured?
So in both cases, they both have, of course, to make sure that both the teams have a great alignment, a certain part of their OKRs are overlapping. And this is, by the way, great conflict solver, because nothing has killed more growth teams ever than the conflict between the sales and the marketing counterparts. So having a bit of an overlap, at least 20% of their OKRs overlapping, is actually super powerful in making sure. Oftentimes they will go against the person setting the OKRs if the numbers are not so high, a number not so low, but they will not fight each other because they feel their interests are aligned. Whereas, if you create these handoffs, there are often finger pointing at each other. Well, this person gave me bad leads, which is why I'm not able to do X or Y. Or, well, I gave them X or Y leads, but they were not able to hit their target. So I think in our case, there is a bit of an overlap. But however, we're able, since we're talking about marketing now, we're able to build a lot of leading indicators. Lagging indicators like revenue or conversions, etc., are great when you're a bit more mature. But initially, what you need to obsess about are leading indicators, such as engagement. You can build hundreds of targets and matrices around engagement, and they are good numbers to go after.
Engagement of lead or engagement of lead using a trial?
No. Engagement with the prospect. See, I think another thing which I strongly believe in is that when it comes to ABM, the kind of time it will take you to get your first customer will probably disappoint you, especially a founder which has worked in inbound. I still remember when we got our first ABM customer, right, conversion. By that time, we had given up. I was actually sure that, we can't do this. This company is not going to buy from us. They're just wasting our time. They're probably these people, or if I can say Babu, sitting on their seat and they're just, like having fun, talking to me, and after the call, they make fun of me and, things like that. That's what I had in my mind. that story cooking around, and that's all I could think of. We had given up, and when they finally came up with the purchase order, I was like, is this for real? I was shocked. I was surprised. So, for founders which have not done this, it's going to take a while, which means that if you will time your targets or goals around conversions in ABM, your whole team will be super disappointed by that.
I'm totally with Ankit on this, right? Like I internally told my team that if it will take at least a year for you to build a decent pipeline, not even conversion. Forget about conversion.
Exactly.
1 year is what I've told them to like get some 500,000 pipeline. Let's see how much it converts later.
Have you also started with ABM at SuperOps?
Yeah, I've hired someone in the US. He's going to set up the team. So next year his target is to make sure this engine at least works, not even a revenue target.
Having seen the worst of sales and marketing folks, okay, I just feel like just the engagement with the prospect seems like a very gameable metric. How do you ensure that's not happening? How do you ensure that it's not just numbers for an email being exchanged and the incentives being backed, and that's actually adding to the conversion?
Yeah,
but their variable pay is tied to it, no? Why?
But the conversion hasn't happened, right? So the conversion happens much later. So how do you ensure that accountability?
Varun has a valid point where, you see often. So for example, if, I would keep CTR or clicks on my emails as a metric, I would often then notice that, they were being, the clickbaity, links were being used so much that, just to optimize, this happens from time to time, which is why all your OKRs need not be just quantitative. Of course, they need to be measurable, but at the same time, you need a qualitative review. And what you typically need is a maker-checker model in the organization where you have a set of people who are not only doing it just for the sake. Fundamentally, their intrinsic motivation should not be coming from just hitting the goal, but also
high integrity people.
High integrity and raising the bar. People who are really passionate about raising the bar, they would probably not let it happen. So it's about the people that you'll pick, but you do need a balance of both of them, because sometimes these people who come up with these unique jugards, if I can say, are also the ones which will come with very good creative ideas. So it's not to look down upon them, but at least in my experience, we've seen a combination of both set of people is super powerful.
I have also a RevOps org, which kind of actually reports into the founder, which sit with the sales, but they'll be the hygiene check folks for these, right?
So they manage the metrics?
Correct.
So these are like XISB, XIM people, kind of like BizOps, but focused on revenue. So they're keeping the engine oiled.
Correct. Setting the target, to making sure the hygiene of the CRM, to making sure all the processes has been managed. So they will be with the sales team, but they will be reporting into the CEO or CEO office or the CRO usually.
So these folks are also part of your pipeline reviews?
Yes, they run the pipeline reviews.
They run the pipeline reviews on a weekly basis.
Yeah. Yes.
How many people do you have doing RevOps?
So I have 2 people now. One junior person who listens to all the call and sends us like executive summary where we can correct the rebuttals and which things like that. A senior person owns the strategy for setting targets and variable pay, spiff and things like that.
So Arvind, quick question. While that might be great for running your pipeline and getting a check of the business that you're doing, but when it comes to and lagging indicators, right? But when it comes to, let's say, marketing leading indicators, are they able to go into that depth? Do they have the technical expertise and understanding to actually review? If somebody's, let's say, creating the system.
Marketing leads, like say somebody unqualifies a lead, right? Like making sure they work with the product team to find out if there is any like activity running into the product, and making sure that sales will easily mark it as unqualified. So the RevOps team will be responsible to go back to the sales and say that no, there is activity, you need to work on it. So that level of activity is where RevOps will come in. But the marketing also, there will be balance. You also have to give the control to marketing. Marketing has markups. It's not a team, but someone who takes care of analytics and everything who will parallelly work. So you need to empower both.
So Ankit, I still do not have an understanding of the structure of your marketing team on the ABM side. How is it actually structured? So what kind of roles do you have on the ABM side?
Essentially, how it is structured is we have center of excellences, which are common between inbound and ABM. For example, things like, doing research, marketing research, which by the way is different from your lead contact research, etc. And then person who's writing copy, design people. So those are like centers of excellences which you've built. Of course, once the team grows, there's multiple people. Initially, our whole ABM team was just probably 3-4 people. So there were people doing, jack of all trades. And it evolved to a point where we had at one point maybe like 16, 17 people doing ABM, which included events. And then you build them around activities, right? Whereas, some would be events, some would be more around generating online audiences, which by the way, display marketing is super helpful. Like, for example, one of the things that we did early on is that we don't expect our buyers or ABM buyers to interact with us, right? And it's extremely difficult for you to just pick up the phone and call them, hey, could you buy from us? That's the biggest mistake you can do, right? So in this whole process, you have to first build a relationship with them. And to be able to do that, the best thing that you can do is get them to listen to you while not being extremely obtrusive, which is with display marketing. Now, in our industry, there is a handful of people. I think we came up with a list of maybe only 500 companies, which we really wanted to, the big ones we wanted to go after, in which there would be, let's say, 5,000, maximum 5,000 people who we want to influence, right? Direct decision makers, influencers, buyers, whatever, right? So I can't go out and create a targeting campaign on display media. These people are not searching for a solution, right? It's a little bit of a segue from your question, Varun, but it'll help you understand how this organization was built, because we got few display marketing folks and one copy person together to create a small pod, right? To basically give them the objective that why don't you guys go ahead and get me this audience of 5,000 people, which is from all over the world. And all are ICPs, but extremely scarce in, where how you can target them. Maybe somebody likes watches, somebody likes golf. So how do you target them? The thing which we came up with was, retargeting. And what we would, the copy person, the content person, what they would do is they would create extremely useful content for the decision makers, for the ICPs, which had zero impact on our business. This was not connected to, this was not linked to us selling at all, right? We were not talking about a product. We were not even sometimes talking about the problems. And all we would do is create content for them and make them click the link. Once they click the link, we have, this is a targeted email. This is targeting communication, even sometimes, WhatsApp salespeople are sending them. We converted our salespeople from salespeople to actually, your friend on the bar stool across in the bar, where they could have those conversations without being, so direct about the offering and the problem, and, just trying to help the ICP. But in that process, sending something with a link, which has some UTM parameters, etc. Eventually, we ended up building this 3,000-4,000 people audience set, which was so powerful, because now that you have 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 of your target people in a display campaign, you can actually tell them, you can send them a message, display campaign anywhere when they're on the web, and subconsciously, start positioning yourself so that, when the opportunity comes in the future, they're already aware of you, right? Or they're aware of what's going on in the company. So, for example, this became a pod. But, over the years it evolved, the org structure evolved quite a bit. From having this 3-4 people team, we were very fast, and we were very, we did sprints where, if we found great insights, it was so nimble for us to change the org structure to just make sure that the right people would come together and their OKRs were aligned to, hit the goals. But eventually,
just to, I know you briefly touched upon it, but just to understand it better. So you had the targeted database list, and you started showing ads wherever they went through AdWords. Yes. Is it?
Yes.
So, okay.
Through the retargeting campaigns.
Retargeting happens based
because
on, even though they don't come to your website.
It's a very special situation that Ankit was in, because a bunch of things are happening over here. So you have the sales team which is invested in the long term, and they're sending these UTM tagged links.
Correct.
You have a nimble organization which has very nice and thorough communications on each change event. So these changes, that restructuring that he's talking about, these shake up an organization like crazy, because people just settle down. They don't like change.
Correct.
And because of the documentation culture, because of the deep written text communication culture, because of the tightness around the OKRs and the respect and the discipline around the metrics, AdPushup was able to be nimble around these changes, and between that span of 3-4 years, really grow like crazy, because of this very special sauce, which secret sauce, which starts from like sales, goes on to marketing, and has like these copy folks, and then there's this organizational culture around documentation, metrics, accountability, high integrity people, kind of like making sure the metrics are not being gamed, the culture being very, having some level of depth. Like Ankit, quite impressive, huh? Like the way that you've managed to create that machine. That's the word that I was
Yeah.
looking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about the database aspect, because that's also like, 5,000 contacts and across such diverse set of industry, and knowing their interest around those watches, as you said, it's not easy.
A lot of it involved, people spending time, like to go super personalized, need to put marketing folks, not any junior person who's a data entry operator who can't even fathom, what's happening in their world, but really smart folks who are willing to get their hands dirty and, go do research almost to the point where, it's sometimes even going to their social media profiles, personal profiles, trying to find out more about them, right?
So I'm presuming like these folks mapped out these organizations, right? So it's a practice which a lot of folks in sales world don't do, but ABM, it's quite common of doing organization mapping. So you're recreating the org chart from the publicly available information, so you know who reports to who's your potential champion.
That, and also what these people are doing, in their, let's say, personal space. What do they enjoy? What do they like? See, at the end of the day, who you're selling to is not a company, but is a person, right? Their decision-making process might involve multiple steps, but there are multiple people. There has to be one person who's, let's say, the end decision maker, and that person is a human at the end of the day. And how do you win a human's heart? By getting their emotions involved. That other playbook is still the same. You have to basically win a person to win their business. Now, with that insight, what you do is, how do you engage with them? While you need to talk about your product and your work and your challenge, but they're not even listening because they're not coming with the need to you. So you need to first engage with them. So all our touch points, which I would say initially was a bit bold for us, and a lot of people didn't like it in the company. They thought we would be too intrusive. We would, end up looking like spammers, but we would deeply engage with people around their interests. Let's say we would take out a bunch of people on a golf game, right? Or we would send somebody, they were really interested in about horoscope and things like that. We got like a very famous, like astrologer to make a video about them, giving some details. I know somebody was very passionate about football. So we got a very popular footballer to make a happy birthday video about them on their birthday. I know somebody was into astrophysics. So we got a star named after them, on one of those websites, but they produce a proper legit certificate, right? And then these people like, wow, what happened? Who are you? So it's not connected to our business at all. So somebody might think it's odd that, we're doing this, but this is what led to a lot of, personal connections with the sales reps, and which led to communication and, building a relationship and eventually business.
Ankit, you told a lot of things which you can actually tell to a girlfriend or a wife. All those things like naming a star after them.
I think that's what he did. He like bought a bunch of these romantic playbooks and turned them into ABM. But see, I know all this stalking and the profiling, if I were to use those words, is also like you can do that, but it's because AdPushup, I've seen behind the scenes, the CRM discipline that AdPushup follows is where this also led to some actionable items. So that profiling and that belief around each individual in the company, seeing CRM as a discipline, in Kalyan's words from Alma Base, and not just as a task or an action to log, is how you execute all of this. Because otherwise, you might still be doing this, but if it's not being logged in a central place where people would revisit and then kind of like be able to understand that profile and take action out of it, it's all useless, right? So again, it comes to that well-oiled machine.
Garbage in, garbage out. That's how we call it.
I know I'm digressing a bit, but 2 sessions in SaasBoomi annual. I know which ones you're doing, so please make sure that you take out time on that.
You have to tell the Sutradhar and he will take care of it.
Yeah.
So Ankit, I have questions. Like I also want to take to a different tangent. I'm sure other than account-based marketing, you would have invested in other channels like partnerships and inbound and everything. So I wanted to see what other channels worked for you and what did you, how did you invest in it?
That's a great question because, there's a bit of an overlap in what we did in ABM. Our events and partnership, basically they come together really well. So for example, with some of the largest companies, right, who don't know about us. Now we had not raised, tens of millions of dollars, unlike some people here. But
the VC magnets?
Both of you are VCs for all the audience here, people who invested in me.
No. Of course, we're happy that, and we hope that Arvind continues to do that and raise these valuations by, tens folds and hundreds of folds. But the point was, we did not have that luxury. So, which meant that people did not see our positioning was not, even though we were profitable, we were growing fast, we had the Financial Times logos, of fastest growing companies, whatever, for a few years. But people did not see us. When they would see our name, they would still, in their mind. And by the way, it's very important for a founder to realize that, because while you breathe in and breathe out your business every day, you need to be able to comfortably think from other people's perspective, whether that is your employee, whether that is your buyer, or whoever the decision maker is. When you look at it from their perspective, the world changes. You're just a small dot in their world. So, you think of it and they wouldn't think about us as, like a very significant company or, something they need to be really spending time with. But however, when you start doing these co-sell partnerships, which we've done, let's say with companies with Microsoft, because we were very early in the Azure ecosystem, we actually, our biggest co-marketing, co-sell motion till date is with Google. And the person, of course, who started it, back in 2015, 16 is actually now ventured out on his own, and we're still great friends. I've actually invested in this company as well recently. The point was that, with Google, right, we became such good partners that at points where we would do an event in Chicago as a co-marketing activity, which Google will host. They will take care of the venue, the lunch, dinner, drinks, whatever that is. And when we would invite the same set of prospects under the banner of Google saying that, look, Google and AdPushup are doing this event, suddenly, their response will change and they would be so excited to come and participate. So, the association with stronger brands was really helpful in proving to some of these buyers that, we are worth their time, and they need to, the same message, which we would send them when it would come from a partner, which of course were, incentivized as well. So, when we make more money and we generate more revenue and we close more deals, our partners, sales reps, or, the co-marketeers which we had along with them, they're okay. That was, I think, the most hard part, which took a while. But once we made sure that the other large organizations, team members are completely in sync with our goals, it was amazing. They would work, their ass off. They would work so hard to make sure. And, they'd put on a positive comment for us everywhere they could. And then again, these same buyers, when they would hear this from somebody from, let's say, a Google or a Microsoft, their belief in us would change, 1000x more.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Like kind of piggybacking with the larger brand, co-marketing with them, but definitely
sounds easy.
It is. The question is, what's in it for Google? So that's what I think Ankit would have cracked. Like we should always think about it. Like, why are they doing a favor for us? So if there is a leverage on your part on finding out how Google can make something out of you, then I think we'll be able to do.
And you'd be surprised, it's not even sometimes the whole company. It's some person somewhere, some VP, some, head of whatever, director, somebody. If their OKRs you can align with yourself in some way, that's more than enough.
Did you end up doing something similar with Facebook as well, or was it just Google?
We tried with Facebook, but I think our businesses were not as much overlapping. They were more prominent on the app side, where we had taken a conscious decision that we'd focus more on the web than the app space. We did end up meeting a few people. I remember one of our angel investors helped, I was new to Singapore. They had a large office, APAC office here. So we flew over, he introduced us, our angel investors. We set up a few meetings, but largely, they were much slower and we realized it was probably because their internal alignment was so different that we couldn't find that overlap, which was so easy for us to capitalize on in Google.
Awesome.
And by the way, it took time. It took 3-4 years to crack
Even
something.
with Google, huh?
Yeah. It takes time. Initially, our partnerships were different. We were in different teams, and then there were, like whole lot of obstacles. We couldn't find how to make sure their OKRs overlap, etc. A bunch of things. And then it's also the people part. Once you make everything work, then how do you build a great relationship with somebody there who would really trust you, and they would work hard to ensure that, why would they work hard for your success, right? Even when the OKRs align, because at large companies, everything is mediocre in most ways.
So when you had that relationship with Google, did you go with the intent that eventually it would be co-marketing, or that was the eventual outcome, that wasn't the intention?
There is definitely a bit of serendipity involved, which means that when we went there, we just wanted them to buy us, right? We thought Google will buy our company,
Which actually brings me to the question, so for you had a successful exit, you sold your company, and how did all these activities, like marketing activities, were you prepared for this? Were you preparing yourself for this and for a day where you might get acquired, or keeping those doors open? This is kind of an exit strategy always. So what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so look, about acquisition or something, to be honest, maybe a few years before this happened, at one point I was thinking whether I want to be, what next? We were, quite clear we were going to hit our annual goal this year, and the next year we had a good visibility. So, and we were profitable, right? We were doing almost 20% profit margins, etc. But the next question was, what do I do next? Would I take this to an IPO or would I not? And I just realized, look, I'm not ready for a public company yet. I wanted to learn the process, which I'm learning a lot right now, by the way, being part of a public company. But at the same time, can I take it? I was personally not sure, right? Maybe not in this birth, if I can say it in the sense of having this startup, maybe in the next one, I don't know, but not yet. So that's when I realized, we'd be open to, partnership or acquisition. And there were so many overlaps when, it's easy to look back in that journey, where I think a lot of things that we did in ABM, a lot of things that we did in our inbound marketing were so many touch points, because I remember, of course, we spoke to multiple buyers, right? We had multiple offers in the past. And I know in some of those cases, people were just looking at some of our campaigns, our press releases, our coverage, and, they were getting more and more excited about acquiring us, because, as a private company, there's very limited signals that go out in the outside world, right? Your financials are definitely not one of them. And a lot of times when people see PR news about, you being featured somewhere, you're doing a great event, people, especially in your industry, they draw a lot of conclusions out of that, right? Positive ones, hopefully. But with that, we saw that a lot of these touch points were making people who were out on the sidelines more and more excited, about our company. So I think this played an extremely crucial part. And I can also tell you that we did one of our events, this ABM event, which co-marketing event with Google. That was one of the points. The company which eventually acquired us, Genie, we met a lot of the leadership team in the US. They were also flying in from Japan. And it was around the setup of a co-marketing event that we had done, which they found quite impressive as well. So we can give 100% attribution to at least one touch point, where even in this M&A journey, marketing was involved in both firms.
Awesome. So Ankit, I think we are also planning for another edition of Life After Exit, behind the scenes of Ankit in Dubai. Maybe we should do another edition with that. But
Habibi.
I know where this is going. But thank you so much, Ankit. It was really, really fun talking to you and learned a lot today.
It's a fanboy moment for me. Every time I feel like, I know his playbook, I'm like, there's just so much to learn. I'm going to do this, by the way. I'm going to fly over, spend a week with you. I did this with Pallav. I'm going to spend a week with you, go to office with you, just see how you're working. Just observe.
Ankit, have fun. I know what will happen if I travel with him. I'm curious what you both will be doing.
I'm the nerd. Yeah, I'm just gonna be like on the sidelines. He's not even gonna realize that I exist.
Yeah. But when I met you, Varun, and we started interacting, it was no different. I mean, there's still so much to learn, from Arvind and Varun, both of you. But with Varun, I can tell you one thing, which I think I've told you this, Varun, but back in like 2002, 2003, right, when I started my hosting company, the only, software we would see for help desk, right, which would be Kayako. And I was just so amazed the day when I found out that it is running from India, and not even India, from Punjab, Jalandhar. And I was like, what? How is this possible? I really lost my mind. I said, this is not possible. What am I doing? So it was very inspiring. I can still remember about 20 years ago. So thanks for that inspiration, man.
Man, you inspire me now. Yeah. Great stuff. Thanks, Ankit, for taking the time out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ankit.
See you, both of you, in Dubai soon, yeah?
For audience, please don't forget to subscribe and share. Thank you, everyone.